I think you're going to need some sort of weather scare.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Comstock channel. I'm Marlin Bohling with you. I'm joined by the president of Comstock Investments, the one and only Matthew Kruse. He joins us today. And Matthew, we had the new crop progress and condition update from USDA, and I assume you want to talk about how the status of the new crop is.
We're planning fast. No real surprises there. We're well above our historical average. In the case of soybeans, it's got to be a record. I think they had us at 66% overall compared to the 48% historical average. So I think a lot more growers are planting those soybeans first, or even in tandem with the corn. It just seems like they're recognizing that there's benefits of planting the soybeans a little bit earlier than normal, and so. But yeah, we're finally getting some good rainfall this week, and so I think people are pretty happy about that.
Well, let's take a look at what we have going on for planting weather and early season growing weather here. So here is the first map to take a look at. Now, this is anomalous temperatures. This would be through May 29th, if I'm reading this correctly.
Yeah, so I mean, most of what we've been talking about is precipitation that you read about, but I thought it was interesting that we're actually going to cool off here for the next week or more, and you kind of see temperatures falling 10 degrees below their average. And of course, most of that is in the northern Corn Belt, Minnesota, the Dakotas, Wisconsin, but it gets down into kind of the northern half of Iowa and parts of the eastern Corn Belt there as well. But so yeah, we're getting the rains that we need, which is good. I think a lot of people were, at least in the western Corn Belt, were very dry, and I know in other areas there, eastern Corn Belt, they're leaning more wet. But we're happy getting the rainfall. But we're looking at these temperatures, it seems like the growth is development is going to slow down or stall here, at least for a little while, as we're they got some temperatures that are going to fall back into the 30s in some of the areas in the Dakotas. So probably not a lot of crop development going to go on here in the next week.
Well, I know last year at this time, we were really concerned about all the flooding going on in the northwestern Corn Belt. And that was a year where we had a lot of prevent plant acres, you would call them. What do you think about this year here?
We're coming up on our final planting dates here for corn anyway. We got a little bit more time on beans, what you kind of see in Iowa and southern Minnesota. May 31st there is kind of the end there. And for the larger parts of the Dakotas, it's May 25th. So we're recording this on the 20th right now. So we're coming up on the end there. Not that you can't plant it after that, but you begin to lose your crop insurance coverage by 1% a day after that point. And so, but I think it looks like Minnesota was already close to 90% done, I think, and so I think they'll get most of that done. There won't be much left, and the Dakotas were playing pretty fast here as well. But what this kind of says to me, if jump ahead to that other graph, is that we're probably going to be on the lower end of corn prevent plant acres. Yeah, so you look at the outlier there in 2019. I don't know if you remember that year, Marlin. It was super wet and everything got planted really late. A lot of stuff got planted in late May or even June, and so we had record corn. This is just the corn. Doesn't include soybeans and other crops, but otherwise it'd be a lot higher than that. But you kind of see there's a lot of years where it was 1 million acres or less. That's not too uncommon. And you look at 2021, when we had a really fast planting season, there was just 620,000 acres is all prevent plant for corn. That's why it kind of leads me to believe that we're kind of heading that same direction again. We're planting very quickly. We're getting the crop in on time. It's raining this week, but the forecast for next week is already showing that the rainfall is going to ease up again. And so I think a lot of farmers are going to be able to get back in the field here relatively soon, as soon as it dries out here next week. And so they'll be able to wrap things up very quickly. So no reason to expect that we're going to see significant prevent plant acres, which the fact that we're going to have the lower than average prevent plant acres is probably going to lean bearish for the market, just because most of the things are going in and they're going in well.
I had heard some private forecasters talking about Brazilian corn and soybean production. And I believe that they were actually picking up their estimate for Brazilian corn production, weren't they?
Yeah, that's right. So they had a big jump in the USDA report. They were at 126 million metric tons last month. They boosted that 4 million metric tons to 130 for this growing season. They're at the tail end now. They're going to start harvest here pretty soon, I think, in the next couple weeks. They did increase the bean crop slightly, but we got it converted here for you, and so they found almost 250,000 more acres again of soybeans. Just every report that come out, they just keep adding acres that they can't seem to stop, and so yeah, they're at 117.6 million acres of soybeans and 6.18 billion bushels compared to we're looking at a 4.3 billion bushel crop for this season, and so they're almost 50% larger than our bean crop already. It just keeps getting larger, and so that's based off of a 168 million metric ton crop. And then for next season, so the 25-26 season, the USDA has already projected 175 million metric tons. So they're still looking for, another boost there to those acres. But you can see the corn crop, we're still quite a bit larger than theirs. Over 3 times larger in the case of the corn, just under 5 billion bushels overall, based off of 52.8 million acres. Most of that, of course, is coming from that second crop. Almost 80% of it is. And so that's right now, they're probably in their September, what would be our September period, where they're going to start harvesting pretty soon, just waiting for the crop to dry out. And I haven't seen any rainfall at all in the month of May for the most part. I mean, very insignificant precipitation there. So I think the crop is going to dry out fast, and you're going to see a pretty rapid harvest take place there in Brazil.
Now, here is a look at the exports coming out of Brazil. What kind of trends are you looking at here so far this year?
Well, you kind of see that the soybeans, there's been an increasing trend, pretty much doubled in the last 10 years. You look at 2015, that in the case of soybeans at 54 million metric tons. Last year was 98.8, just under 100. I think they're expecting close to 105, 104 million metric tons for this year. And so they're slightly ahead of where they were last year at this time. Long ways to go, but they're in their peak export season right now, kind of April, May, and even June are kind of their principal soybean export months. And so they're very competitive with their soybean exports right now on the global market. As we get into June, you're going to see that start to taper off, especially in the July, and then you're going to see corn kind of replace that. You're going to see corn in the July, August months kind of replace that and really take off. And so they don't export much in the beginning part of the year. That's partly why you're seeing our exports as strong as they are, and that's really kind of been the savior for us, that we've seen strong exports, and we're getting a little bounce from that today in the markets. But you're going to, in the second half of the year, Brazil kind of takes over once that harvest from the second corn crop takes place, and that starts flooding the global market here come, July, August predominantly.
I did see a report here recently where they were talking about, of course, the Chinese demand for U.S. products has dropped way off when it comes to like corn and soybeans. But they had mentioned that Brazilian corn exports to China were also down. Now, would that just be because of the seasonal tendencies here, or are they shying away? Have they got enough purchased for a while?
Well, partly it's seasonal, but I mean, the trend is pretty clear. It seems like they've been little by little been pulling away from us, and we've been doing the same thing on other things. We're trying to bring some manufacturing back home and kind of reduce our reliance on computer chip manufacturing, those types of things that are a little bit more of a national security issue to us, I think, just because everything's made with computer chips these days. But it seems like you hardly go a week goes by where I don't read some new announcement and partnership that China has with Brazil, and I know it's not just Brazil; they're doing a lot in Africa and other countries as well. But Brazil is obviously a priority for them, and last week it was that they made an announcement that they're gonna purchase more DDGs, for example, from Brazil, and we still made some minor sales. The U.S. made some minor sales of DDGs to China here last year, but they were pretty insignificant. Like they've been dropping the last several years, and now they're looking for Brazil ratcheting up those DDGs as they're obviously producing more corn ethanol, and DDGs is a byproduct of that. So, they said that DDG production can double here in the next 10 years or less in Brazil, and all of that can pretty much be absorbed by China. And so the hard part is those DDGs are predominantly produced in the center part of the country. So it's getting that shipped out of the country is the challenging part. But, Lula, President Lula of Brazil was in China recently meeting with their leaders there, and they came out with some other announcements, how they announced $1 billion investment in SAF as well. And that's going to be in the sugarcane ethanol in southern part of Brazil is going to be used to produce sustainable aviation fuel. And so it's just stuff like that. They're constantly coming out with new reports. They signed some 30 trade deals. And so I don't think they're going to announce them all at once. They're just going to let them trickle out. And so I think you're going to be hearing more and more about this as time goes on.
Well, it's still early in the growing season. What kind of opportunities are you either watching for or trying to be aware of as we move forward into the growing season for some marketing opportunities?
We are obviously looking to place more puts or hedges on the corn crop. I wouldn't expect any. Unfortunately, in the situation we're at now with record acres and so far favorable weather, I think you're gonna need some sort of weather scare to kind of create some sort of sustainable or favorable rally, and so I wouldn't expect fireworks anytime soon. I think we're kind of setting ourselves up for a pattern similar to last year, where we kind of drift sideways or lower during the summer months. I think it was last year we kind of found a bottom in August, and so that could be a similar situation. And then starting in August, we found a bottom. A lot of that just because a lot of our exports, and it was demand driven. We started eating away at those old crop stocks, and that kind of lifted us and started a long-term rally that really didn't top out until the following February. And so, time will tell, but I feel like we're kind of heading that same direction right now. There's just really not a lot to point to. Obviously we're talking a lot about the exports, but as I just said, that's somewhat seasonal, right? And Brazil's going to take that market away from us, I think, here in the next couple months. And so it's really, we got a couple months where I think our exports can make big news, but then it's going to shift to South America. And there's not a lot that we can do about that. They're just going to be competitive. It is what it is. And so, that's kind of what I'm looking for. So I think we're going to advise a lot of our customers to get ready on any additional bump in the market. We're going to start learning more hedges and put those in place, and it'll still keep our physical crop opportunities available, keep our basis potential basis opportunities more available. We have seen the basis strengthen later in the year or in the winter months, and so I think we want to keep that opportunity still available and open to us.
Well, a lot of long-range weather forecasters had been kind of looking forward to and pointing toward a dry summer in the plains, especially the central and northern plains. What if it doesn't happen?
Well, if it doesn't happen, the USDA has us pegged at 181 bushels per acre in the corn and 52.5 for beans. I know a lot of people take issue with that 181 bushels per acre yield estimate. But we are starting out really well. Now, obviously, things can change quickly, but the weather pattern is starting out very, very favorable. I've talked about in the past, once you get this crop in early and it goes in well, it's really tough to kill. And we've seen this in the past where you've gone through really wet patches or dry patches for extended period of times, but this crop is really resilient. And so, it's going to take more than a week or two of what major weather event to really impact that yield. So it might be a little bit on the high side, but I don't know. I think our yields could surprise us. Again, a lot of people say, well, if we're increasing our corn acres, it makes it harder for us to reach those lofty yields. Well, If that's true, then the opposite is true for soybeans because we're reducing our soybean acres, right? So it should make it easier for us to get that 52.5 bushel per acre yield, which is historically a high yield in beans. But if the crop is getting in the earliest it's ever been put in, who's to say if you get good weather that it can't exceed that? And so, yeah, they probably are in the high end, but it just comes down to weather. And the last long-term forecast I looked at in June, for the most part, still looked favorable. There's always going to be those problem areas that lean wetter or lean drier, but for the most part, it looked like June was still pretty decent. So, but obviously the longer you look out, the less accurate those long-term forecasts are. So a lot of things can change between now and then.
Well, traditionally, when it comes to the corn crop, nowadays, it used to be the old saying, knee high by the 4th of July. Now farmers are disappointed if it's not tasseling by the 4th of July. That particular holiday seems to mark a very important date on the calendar, where if it pollinates okay by the 4th of July and it has enough rainfall by then, usually it's hard, like you say, to kill the crop after that. And the marketing opportunities beyond the 4th of July, if you have decent weather, they're kind of scarce, right?
Yeah, it seems that way. And I can only talk more probably from personal experience in our area in Northwest Iowa. It just seems like our crop runs out of water late in the season. And so the earlier we can put it in, the better that we are. Now, maybe it's just a fluke, but it seems it's been that way like the last 5 years in a row almost. To be honest. And so, but we still put a lot of tile in because it gets really wet in the first half of the season, and then it just turns really dry in the last half of the season. And so, but yeah, that's why I feel like everyone wants to get the crop in early, just so it has a chance to kind of make it through the end of the season.
Well, I guess the point being, once we get to that critical time of the year, you better have a pretty sharp pencil and have your marketing plans in place by then, and make some decisions because, gosh, we're only, 5-6 weeks away from that already at this point.
Yep, it's happening fast. And, it's somewhat seasonal, right? We look for some of these spring planting rallies, and here we are, we're coming up on the end of May already. And so, we're hoping for one more little jump here. We've had some good news in the exports. There's a little bit of dry weather next week. But beyond that, there's just not a lot that we can point to right now. I think one thing that would help is more trade deals. If we get more clarification from the trade deals with China and some of our major trade partners. But, hard telling when those are going to come. They're kind of few and far between at this point, and they could take a while. So it's not something that you can really plan on at this point. It seems pretty risky to plan on that. So, in our case, on our farm in Northwest Iowa, it's, our cost of production is high. It's over $1,000 an acre. And, our rent is, we just got our rent value updates for 2025 and paying between $319 and $333 per acre on rent. And so, I'm in a situation, I have to have a floor. I have to have know what my worst case scenario is, and I can't leave that to chance. And I know those puts can be expensive, but the market can move. I mean, they can be 20 cents, but the market can move that in a very short amount of time. There's ways to cheapen that up. Of course, if you want to give Comstock a call, but that's what we're advising going forward, is just getting more protection on, kind of leaving the upside open, but protecting our downside.
Good idea. I know your staff has a lot of ideas, and I encourage that as well. All right. Well, thanks for taking time to talk with us this week, Matthew, for the update. Appreciate that a lot. Matthew Kruse of Comstock Investments. That'll do it for this episode. For producer Breanne Jenkins, I'm Marlin Bohling. We'll catch you next time right here on the Comstock channel. Futures trading involves risk. The risk of loss in trading futures and/or options is substantial, and each investor and/or trader must consider whether this is a suitable investment. Past performance is not indicative of future results.